Does it sound like anything, the discussion that you've had anytime at the office this week? No, it's a message that it sounds so different than what we've heard, so different than what we've been used to talking about. It is truly countercultural. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to look at the life of Abraham. We're going to see what life was like for him, the things that he did, and how we might be able to also walk in his footsteps as the father of our faith, what it means for us to truly walk in the way of faith. This is just one example that I happened to find this week. I thought that it related really well to what we were talking about today, as the idea of going against the grain, going against the tide, against what other people are doing. I thought it'd be a great example for us to say, you know, sometimes we just need to take a time out. Sometimes we just need to get a higher perspective on things and see what difference that makes in how we live and how we talk. So let's go back about 4,000 years and see what this looked like in Abraham's life. The scripture that we're going to read today is taken from Genesis 11. We're going to start at verse 32. One day, Terah took his son Abram, his daughter-in-law Sarai, the son of Abram's wife, and his grandson Lot, his son Haran's child, and he moved from Ur of the Chaldees. He was headed to the land of Canaan, but they stopped at Haran and settled there. Terah lived there for 205 years and died while still in Haran. The Lord had said to Abram, "Now leave this country and your relatives and your father's family and go to the land that I will show you." Now, I'm sure you're all up on your geography, your biblical geography, and you're going, Ur of the what, who? And I promise we'll get to all of that. You're not going to be lost as we do, okay? Terah was the dad of this big clan, Abraham. We're going to talk about Abraham, but he started out with his name being Abram. And they journeyed from Ur of the Chaldees, which is modern-day Iraq. Think Baghdad, okay? You remember back when you were in 5th grade and they talked about the Fertile Crescent? Well, this was the Fertile Crescent. There was an area that people could find better pasture lands for their sheep and their goats, and people were flocking to that because they wanted to be able to feed their families and they wanted to be able to find work. And so they were migrating across this Fertile Crescent. And in this crescent that goes like this, Ur of the Chaldees is right over here. Okay, like I said, it's modern day Iraq. Think Baghdad, and you kind of got an idea of where we're talking. Terah takes his family from here, to Haran. Okay, the Bible tells us that he was on his way to Canaan. Well, Canaan is from here to here. So he's on his way through this Fertile Crescent all the way to Canaan, but for some reason he stops in Haran. Now, it doesn't really tell us what happened, why he stopped there. All we know is that he only made it part way. Now, the guy lived to be 205 years old. He could have made that trip. We don't know why he didn't. The Bible doesn't tell us why he didn't. All we know is that he started out for Canaan and didn't make it there. And so it was left for Abraham, for God to call Abraham and say, "Abraham, leave where you are, and I want you to follow me further to the land of Canaan. I want you to finish the journey that your dad started." Not sure what happened in Haran. Maybe things got comfortable. Maybe they set up shop, they were able to sell their wares, maybe there was plenty of food. Maybe it's like, well, you know, we don't really have to go to Canaan because things are okay here. Or maybe things got difficult. Maybe somebody got sick, or for some reason they got held up and weren't able to move on. We're not really sure. What I know is probably nothing happened to them that doesn't happen to us. They either got comfortable or things got difficult, and for some reason they stopped while they were halfway to where they were headed. They stopped while they were halfway there, just kind of the way we do sometimes. When we set out to do things and don't quite make it all the way there. Now, this is the thing that I love about Abraham, because his life of faith was literally a journey. Do you ever talk about your journey of faith? The reason we use that imagery is because the father of our faith literally started it as a journey. It's the equivalent of God saying, how many of you remember payphones? You know what I'm talking about when we talk about payphones? Okay, they're non-mobile phones, James, that you have to go to get them. They don't walk around with you. Okay, and so this would be the equivalent of God saying, hey, I want you to take off. I want you to leave everything that's familiar with you, and I want you to go to Canton. When you get to Canton, there's going to be a payphone on Cleveland Avenue, and I'm going to call you at that payphone, and I'm going to tell you where you need to go next. And then when you get to Canton, you get to find the payphone, and then God says, oh, by the way, I'm going to show you where you're going next. I want you to go to Columbus. And on the corner of Broad and High, there's going to be a payphone, another payphone. I want you to meet me there. And Abraham is just responding to this challenge that God gives him, this call to basically say, okay, uproot, take off, let's go. Now, we all think about that and go, man, that was really cool that he did that. You need to understand where, in the midst of all of this, it wasn't any easier for him than it wasn't for us. Not only that, but he wasn't any better at it than we are. In fact, we're going to hear over the next couple weeks how Abraham, he got a lot of stuff wrong. Sometimes he got more wrong than he got right. And yet, he is the father of our faith. He is the father of our faith. Doesn't that give you a little bit of hope? That, man, if this guy can be the father of our faith, maybe, just maybe, we'll be okay too. I don't know what stopped him. Maybe things got hard, maybe things got easy, maybe things got comfortable. But God said, I have more for you. I have more for you. I want you to venture out. So what we're going to do over the next couple weeks as we talk about Abraham is we're going to talk about going against the tide, because this mass migration that was going on at the time, guess which direction it was going? It was going this way. And guess which direction God called Abraham? He called him this way. It's awful hard to stand up against that in the midst of it. It requires faith of us to be able to do that. Let's talk a little bit about what it means to be countercultural. If we're going to go against the tide the way Abraham did, let's talk about what that might mean for us, as what our story teaches us here. First of all, we can't let people's perceptions define who we are. We don't let people's perceptions determine our identity. When this story started, Abraham's name was Abram. And God comes to him, he says, Abraham, I have something special for you. I have something in mind for you. And he does what he has a habit of doing in the scripture, and that is he changed his name. Because when he changed his name, it changed his identity. Now, we understand a little bit of that in our culture. When you get married, you decide whether or not you're going to change your name, because you're changing as a person. Your identity's changing. You're now a wife. You're now a husband. You're now going maybe possibly be a mother or a father. Your identity, who you are, is changing. Well, take that and multiply it by 100, and that's how important a person's name was back then. So when God changes your name, it's a reflection of him telling you your identity. That he's saying, this is who you are. I know you to be this person. Abram, you're going to be Abraham, which means the father of many. Now, there's just one little problem with this. Abraham didn't have any kids. And he was kind of getting up in years. And so in the midst of this, he said, I don't want you to define yourself by those poor, unfortunate looks that people give you when they see that you don't have kids. Kind of when they ask if you have kids and you go, no. And you kind of put your head down and you don't make eye contact with them because you kind of feel like you have to explain why. You feel like, well, they're wondering, is it him or is it her? Who's the problem? And you just kind of feel that little bit of shame. He says, I'm changing your name. That's not who you are. You are Abraham. You are the father of a great nation, the father of many. That's who you are. If we're going to go against our culture, if we're going to be counterculture, if we're going to go against the flow, we need to let God define who we are instead of other people's perceptions of us. Alyssa said it this way. There she is. Not everybody gets a backstage pass to your life. I love that. Not everybody gets a backstage pass to your life. There are people who watch, there are people who come even alongside, but there are very few people who get to go behind the scenes and get to speak into your life and have that kind of access to you. It's not people's perceptions that get to define us. It's who God tells us that we are. Abraham, people's perceptions of him, sometimes he got it right, sometimes he got it wrong. But that wasn't the important thing. It's who God told him that he was. Secondly, if we're going to be countercultural, we have to go where God leads instead of where everybody else is going. Do you know how hard it would be to pick up your family and go the opposite direction where most people were headed? Can you imagine the fortitude that would have taken for Abraham to do? But if we're going to be countercultural, we have to understand where God's calling us. And it's probably not going to look the way everybody else thinks. I don't know why Tara started traveling. All I know is the Bible tells us he didn't make it all the way. And Abraham had to pick up after him to do it. The journey of faith has always been one about going against the tide, moving counter to what other people think and doing God's will. Third, when we venture out, we have to venture out even when we're scared. We have to venture out even when we're scared. Somewhere along the line, we've gotten this idea that if we're good Christians, everything will be at peace. Now, there's something to be said for that. We will have peace in our hearts. We will know that God cares for us and loves us. But if we're following the call of God, we're probably going to be a little scared because we're going to be doing things we've never done before. We're going to be finding out parts of ourselves that we've never found before. We're going to be doing things that don't make us comfortable. We're going to be moving out of our comfort zone. If you're not at least a little scared, I'm going to invite you to listen a little harder for God's voice. He's going to call us, and we need to venture out even when we're scared. We will be swimming upstream. So you'll be right on track. If we're going to be countercultural, we need to understand that our choices, not our circumstances, are the most important things in our life. Our choices, not our circumstances, are the most important factor in our lives. We always, always, always have a choice. Even if we just choose which set of consequences we live with. I had a friend, and we'd go out to lunch every once in a while, and he would frequently tell me about the current chaos going on in his home because his in-laws lived with him. And it kind of became our standing joke of, well, now these weren't the good kind of in-laws who, help clean up and, make sure the kids get off the bus and help you around the house. These were the kind of folks who came in, made a mess, left it there, and expected you to clean it up. And probably the worst part was they were really negative. Never had anything really good to say, especially towards his daughter. And she was probably around 9 or 10 years old. And she started coming into Sunday school, and she started having a prayer request every week that Grandma and Grandpa would find their own house to live in. Grandma and Grandpa would find their own house to live in. So we were out to lunch one time, and I said, hey, I'm curious about something. Why is it that Julie has that prayer request most weeks? What do you think's up with that? He said, you know, it's really hard to please my in-laws. They're always talking about she needs to lose weight. She's always talking about her hair isn't right, or she needs different clothes, or how she needs to stand up straighter, or she just kind of constantly just picking at her. And I said, you know, you can just go, that's just Grandma, because you're an adult. I said, the problem is that Julie's not. She hears everything with no filter. And all of those criticisms go straight into her soul, unchecked by an adult mind. Unchecked by somebody saying, that's just Grandma, or that's just Grandpa. You don't have to listen to that. Well, the problem is I don't have any choice. And I said, well, let's just pretend I said baloney. You always have a choice. You always have a choice. Your circumstances are your circumstances. Can't change where you were born, when you were born, the family you were born into. But you always have a choice in how you respond to your circumstances. Within 6 months, he had found them a house because they were never going to find one. He helped them move because he understood that nobody else was going to do that. Nobody else was going to stand up for his little girl and make her life different. And then she started coming into Sunday school, and she started saying, did you see the new shoes I got? They light up when I walk. Would you pray for my brother that he has a good week at school? Completely changed this girl's attitude and what she prayed to God for when he realized you always have a choice. Always have a choice. And our choices are a greater factor than our circumstances. This journey is going to require faith. It's going to require, like Andy said, that was Andy Stanley, by the way. Some of you may have heard of his dad, Charles Stanley, or you've seen Andy around. He's a pastor in Atlanta that I love to listen to because he's a great communicator. But he always has this way of reminding us what the perspective of faith is. To get our eyes off of the things that are going on around and making sure we remember that God's ways are sometimes higher than ours. And if we keep that vision, if we keep faith in that reality, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. It's going to take faith. Over the next couple weeks, we're going to talk about what that looked like for Abraham. We're going to suggest a couple things that might look like for us. But let me fast forward to the end. Abraham is the father of 3 world religions. 3. He is not a footnote in history. He is not somebody who just happened along to the planet. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Pastor Vicki, I just hope to get my kids' shoes on the right foot before I get them out to the school bus. I'm just hoping that they don't mess things up too bad while they're there, and that I don't get called by the principal to come in. You know, I get that. But there is something you need to remember. You will never be a footnote in their history. You will make a difference in their history. And it will be whether or not you left to follow God and stopped partway, or if you went on through to where he was leading you. Because they're going to have a journey of their own, and they are going to pick up where you left off. They're going to pick up where you left off, and you're going to set the stage for them and the standard for them to follow. You're never going to be a footnote in their history, even if it just looks like getting shoes on their feet and getting them on the school bus. And when they come home and somebody's been picking on them, and somebody's trying to tell them that they need to lose weight, or they need to dress different, or they need their hair different, you can say, your identity is who God says you are, not who the bullies say you are. Your identity is as a person of faith, no matter what happens in our circumstances. Generations will be different because of the choices that you make. Make them in faith. Make them in faith in God. Now, I want to suggest 3 ways that we can do this. 3 things. These are just the low-hanging fruit. These are the easy ones. Now, God may be speaking to you about something else, the way he spoke to my friend about helping his in-laws onto their next house. But these are the easy ones because they fit all of us. If we want to be countercultural, look at the way you spend your money. Look at the way you spend your money. There's a whole lot of people who have a plan for what you do with your money. The question is it God's plan for what to do with your money? It's very hard to get people to join in this journey when it comes down to making those kinds of decisions. Well, I'm never going to have this money again. I'm just going to spend it now. Well, this is what I have left after I pay the bills. What about asking God where he wants you to go with that? You see, it used to be that your net worth was your value. Now it's your credit rating. How big a car can I get? How big a house? Or what kind of clothes my kids have? But when we let God determine our identity, we make our decisions differently. We spend our money differently. Also, how we spend our time. How we handle our time. If you handle your time the way everybody else does, the way this massive tide of people are handling their time, you're going to be tired, you're going to be exhausted, you're going to be cranky. Because we get frayed at the ends when we do too much. Because we're not teaching our kids what it means to say no. There's lots of great things we can do. Not quite as many that we should do. We talked about taking time to just be. That doesn't happen by accident. There is nobody who's going to be encouraging you to do that you're going to see on the television, on your computer screen, on your Facebook feed. This is the place you get to hear, come on, just take time to listen for God's voice and just be. Your life will be completely different if you do that one little thing. And third, if we want to be countercultural, we do it by how we handle our relationships. How we handle our relationships. You don't have to look any further than Facebook to figure out there's a whole lot of people who don't have really good relationships. They're fighting over stuff, they're gossiping about people, they're talking about the latest scandal for whatever, but the relationships are fragile. Because the first time somebody gets mad at you, they just stop hanging out with you. Or maybe you just stop hanging out with them until you're not mad anymore and you forgot what you were arguing about, and then you get back together. The relationships where we spend more time talking about somebody else than talking about our lives. We feel closer together, but really we're closer together because of that person that we're gossiping about, instead of having a real relationship. If we want to be countercultural, we have to risk letting our guard down and letting people in a little closer. We have to risk letting people see who we really are. We have to risk letting people know when they hurt our feelings, being real about it. We have to be willing